Hello YouTube, this is Veteran Mountain Man coming to you today with today's major topic, and that is how the mainstream media, the alternative media, and everybody really are interacting with the world today. So, right now one of the major topics in news, both alt media and mainstream media, is this idea of fake news. And the mainstream media keeps calling alt media fake news, and the alt media keeps calling the mainstream media fake news, and we keep playing off of each other. And even the mainstream media has gone to war with alternative media by trying to force advertisers off of YouTube and change the way monetization is working, things of that nature. I myself have even been demonetized several times on YouTube, and I've only been here a little over 2 months. I've only been monetizing my videos for about a month, so I'm already feeling the pinch as well, even though I haven't brought in a whole lot in the way of advertisers or even in views. But there's this idea that media has always been fair and balanced, and that it's only recently with Fox News and George H.W. Bush that things have gotten way off kilter. Well, let's actually talk about some history of the media today. So, a lot of what initiated the whole fair media concept is the intellectual wars of the late 1800s, early 1900s, where there was a massive push in the United States to promote literacy amongst the population. Because during the Civil War, very few people were actually literate enough to read the declarations of war and even the declarations of surrender. Most people went to church, heard about news from their local neighbors. Maybe 1 in 4 or 5 could read a newspaper, and so they'd get around together and listen to one of them read the newspaper. And this was fairly common up until, the mid-1800s to the late 1800s. And then there was this giant push to create a literate, connected country where newspapers could be sent through these railroads that were being built, and we could communicate across the country and send mail across the country, and we could interact with each other through the telegraph and other methods, because to use a telegraph and to send a telegram, you had to be able to read and write. So there was this huge push to create a minimum standard of literacy, and that push continued on into the 1930s and even into the 1940s. And that also, in turn, spawned a greater amount of media, particularly print media. We're talking newspapers here primarily, but also things such as periodicals, journals, magazines, things of this nature. And that in turn caused a greater consumption and desire for media, because you had more people who could read, and therefore more people wanting to read more things. And so media in and of itself originally was more of a blue-collar type job. It was something that normal citizens in the cities did because they weren't very good at doing other things, or because they didn't want to do other things. And so instead they published media. Well, as time went on in the 40s and 50s, and even in the 60s and 70s, we had these corporate consolidations and an acceleration of the education process, particularly in the late 1940s and early 1950s. There was this massive explosion in college education due to World War II and the Montgomery GI Bill. And even into the 60s, this education boom occurred because we also had the Korean War in the 1950s. And we had people leaving the Korean War with the MGI Bill. And so they went to college, and people hired them. And it became this nomenclature that you had to go to college. And so journalists started having degrees, just like other fields, and it started to twist into this elitist culture. Then in the 1960s, while we were going through this revolution of postmodernism, as well as this socialistic evolution, including a critique on pure tolerance and critical theory, which had come out of Germany in the 1930s and fled to the United States ahead of the Nazi Reich, we started to see a change in society. And at which point the media really started to shift heavy. These people were coming out of schools with sociology degrees or literary degrees, and they were going to write for these companies, these newspapers, and these radio shows, and these television shows, because that's all they knew how to do was write. And so we've had this slow paradigm shift. And what I want to bring forward is that this didn't start in the 90s, people. This started way, 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 way back in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And because of that alteration in our timeline, we are now seeing the effects of those paradigm shifts on society. Because society moves very, very slowly, especially in a constitutional republic. In other types of dictates, such as, dictatorships and oligarchies, changes to society show up usually within a generation. But with changes in a constitutional republic, which is one of the freest forms of societies, short of anarchism, you see a slower change in society because society in and of itself resists change. The society structure tries to slow and stop and kind of alter change to be more of a slight adjustment instead of extreme alterations. So I want to bring forward this proposal and idea. The alternative media is just an extension of the intellectual of the new boom here. Instead of it being a literary boom, it's an access boom. We now all have access to media, to post rhetoric, to create discourse and topics and ideas and bring them forward into the modern setting and bring the discourse forward and adjust how society is interacting. But the mainstream media is still the bulwark of the news concept. And so instead of fighting, we need to find a way to coexist. And I think the best way would, instead of warring with them, is allow true market competition. Let's not ad hominem each other. Let's not attack each other's methods. When you see people being dishonest and disreputable and deceitful, call them out on it. But don't go to war with them. Call them out. Let the subject come forward. Let it be debated publicly. And allow people to come to their own mindset. Because that's the only way we're truly going to change society one way or the other. And that is fighting, believe it or not, but it's fighting with ideas instead of getting dirty and fighting with allegations. Well, that's going to be all I'm going to do today on the mainstream media. Once again, you can follow me here on YouTube. I'm part of the Free Speech Alliance, or you can follow me at minds.com/Veteran Mountain Man. I will also be retransmitting this on vid.me/Veteran Mountain Man. And I want to thank you all and have a good day.